Welcome to Image Union, WTTW's weekly program featuring the work of independent producers. Films and tapes you don't usually see on TV. Every week it's something different, from documentary films to abstract computer graphics. Tonight, highlights from the 3rd National Poetry Video Festival held recently in Chicago. I'm Jean Howard. I'm a poet and one of the organizers of the festival. And in between the videos, I'll talk to some of the other poets and filmmakers. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. What inspired you to put together a poetry video?
We had no idea. I think it was actually '91, now that I think about it. We knew that there was some nice resonance between television and poetry. We could sense that there were people taking poetry to the camera. It seemed to complete a whole process that we'd known, was going on through poetry in Chicago, in particular, through the mid-'80s and then into the '90s. A lot of writers had been very interested in migrating their work from page to stage. That's something you've been involved with,
right.
Performance, a lot of different things like that.
Right.
And even you yourself, again, with a lot of intermedia kind of performances where some parts of the performance are carried visually, either with film or photography, and then some other parts are poetic. We felt that that kind of work needed a place and to be seen, because it was very difficult to assemble people for that specifically. The pieces weren't coming out one after the other. It's a very, if anyone who's in it can testify, it may be like a 3-minute piece, but you'll spend 3 months warming up for that. It'll take you a while to get something finished. So we wanted to showcase some of that. We knew it was happening, and we didn't know what was out there. So we just asked around the town who had tapes. The leaf is ready to turn over now, and it will, and it can, and it's doing that by getting the poetry off a page where people shelve it,
right.
and onto a television set where they're watching and spending their time anyway. I don't think that's a bad enterprise. I think it's just a step in a kind of cultural evolution.
Actually, Women Without Children was written as a poem first, and it was written in the dead of Chicago winter with no plants, no life around but this little orchid in the middle of my house. And so, of course, orchids are very sensual plants, and the whole thing developed as this examination of sensuality, and all of a sudden it got into childbearing, and the next thing I knew I had this really sensual poem about orchids. Now, when I started to work with video, I produced a video with Bob Bolt before, who's produced many and experimented a lot with video, with theater and dance. I talked to him and I said, would you be interested in producing with me? And I showed him 5 or 6 poems, and he chose Women Without Children. And I started relating, as I started thinking of the visuals involved in it, not only the orchids, but I started thinking about my past and the people in my past. And at the time I was thinking about it, I was doing the laundry, and I ran down to get the laundry, and I passed these pictures of my great-grandmother, who is a Mormon polygamist with lots of children. And I just, this flash, this moment of, I have no children, I have this luxurious plant, this orchid, and here is this picture of the eyes of this woman that are really the hardships and all of her children. So it was a comparison of our lives. And I talked to Bob about it, Bob Bolt. And we came up with the images, and it incorporates her eyes and her family along with this orchid and all this sensuality. So it really was the poem first, and then the images, and bringing in that aspect of it later. And it turned out to be almost a direct comparison of my life to her life.
Women without children grow orchids, whose fuchsia lips hang down with spittle, the very tips of fragrant vowels. These women hold flower saples near water and bathe them with mists. They do not wipe at mouths that are always open and slightly obscene. They do not avoid the newborn displaying his sexual parts. Women without children herd the stamens and sticky pistils into the pots, then let them rant free and reckless in front of company. They imagine the instruments of drunken bees as they stagger up from their drop to amber. They worship magenta. Women without children lift the shiny rhizomes, pearlish as boycocks, and feed them to the bark. Fragrant, moist, crumbling to the touch. They stroke green pseudobulbs and veer toward yellow. They lay at night, dreaming of more damp mouths to feed, whose tiny tendrils tumble toward water, whose sticky sneeze leave the kerchief coral, a million minute dots, whose seeds burst forth at her touch.
For me, the experimentation was the next step for performance. You know, performance poets are, this is it. It's not just the poem, but it's the body that's delivering the poem. So now you have your physical self. You know, how are you going to take that one next step? How are you going to present that to everybody besides that group of people in the bar? That's another part of it. You're a performance poet, but, you know, does that mean only 5 people? And what happens when you die? It's dead? So for me, it was a thought about how we as performance poets move on. And how do we get, we did it in a bar. We seriously did performance poetry because the guy was sitting in the bar drinking a beer, watching TV, watching a ball game. We had to get him to listen to our poems. And so we got really theatrical. I used to do poems to people's faces. I'd get down and I would actually go maybe 3 inches away from their face and read this poem. And there's no way someone can avoid that. So it was another step. How do we get this further out and how do we get that into the public's domain? And television is it.
Image Union is a unique program in Chicago television, exclusively featuring the work of independent film and videotape makers.